The Iron Tide, a true story of survival strategy and the birth of an American empire. They said the ocean was a wall. In the winter of 1606, when the ships left England, most of the men on board believed they were sailing toward gold. A few believed they were sailing toward God. Almost none understood they were sailing toward death. The three ships and the Susan Constant, the Godspeed and the Discovery cut slowly through the Atlantic, their wooden ribs groaning like old bones. For 144 days they crossed an ocean that had swallowed fleets and erased maps. Salt rotted rope, rats chewed through grain sacks, fresh water turned sour. Men whispered that the sea itself was cursed. When land finally appeared in April of 1607, it did not look like salvation. It looked wild, silent, and watchful. They named the place Jamestown. What they did not know was that Jamestown would nearly vanish from history before America ever had a chance to exist. The Virginia Company investors in London had promised riches, gold mines, trade routes, spices. Instead, the settlers found swamp. Mosquitoes rose in black clouds. The river water carried disease. The soil near the settlement was brackish and stubborn. Within months, fever began its quiet campaign. Gentlemen colonists, many of whom had never farmed a day in their lives, searched obsessively for gold instead of planting crops. They dug glittering rocks from the riverbanks and sent them back to England. Certain fortune was near. The rocks were worthless. Meanwhile, food ran out. Captain John Smith, a soldier of fortune with a sharp tongue and sharper survival instincts, tried to impose order. He forced the men to work. "He that will not work shall not eat," he declared. It was not cruelty, it was arithmetic. Beyond the wooden palisade walls, the Powhatan Confederacy watched, led by Chief Wahunsenacar, known to the English simply as Powhatan. The Confederacy controlled much of the Tidewater region. This was not empty land, it was organized, cultivated and defended territory. The English were not pioneers stepping into wilderness, they were intruders. At first, trade kept disaster at bay. Corn in exchange for copper, food in exchange for tools. But mistrust simmered on both sides. The English fortified their settlement. The Powhatan tested their defenses. Then came the winter of 1609 to 1610. History would remember it as the starving time. A drought had crippled harvests. Native tribes reduced trade. English supply ships were delayed. Disease spread in tight quarters. Snow fell quietly over a settlement, unraveling from within. Men ate horses, then rats, then shoe leather boiled into broth. Archaeological evidence centuries later would confirm what survivors barely dared write. Some turned to cannibalism. By spring of the roughly 500 colonists present before winter, only 60 were still alive. Jamestown was abandoned in June 1610. The survivors loaded onto ships and drifted downriver, defeated. Then they saw sails. Lord de la Warr arrived with supplies and reinforcements, forcing the colonists to turn back. Jamestown would not die that day. But survival did not equal success. The colony's fortunes shifted not through gold, but through tobacco. John Rolfe, experimenting with Caribbean tobacco strains, cultivated a sweeter leaf, more appealing to English tastes. By 1617, tobacco exports were booming. What had been a dying outpost became a profitable enterprise. Profit changed everything. Land meant wealth. Wealth meant expansion. Expansion meant conflict. In 1619, two events occurred that would shape American history forever. The first was the convening of the House of Burgesses, the first representative legislative assembly in the American colonies. Self-governance had taken root. The second was the arrival of a ship carrying approximately 20 captive Africans. They were traded for supplies. No one in Jamestown could have fully understood the magnitude of that moment, but a system of racialized slavery would grow from it, embedding itself into the economic foundation of the colonies. America's paradox had begun, liberty and bondage rising side by side. Over the next decades, the colony expanded along the James River. Tobacco plantations multiplied. Indentured servants arrived from Europe. African labor shifted from ambiguous status to codified slavery under law. Meanwhile, relations with native tribes deteriorated. In 1622, Powhatan warriors launched coordinated attacks that killed nearly a quarter of the English population in Virginia. It was a message: the land would not be taken quietly. The English response was relentless. Cycles of retaliation and expansion followed. The balance of power slowly tipped as more ships arrived from Europe. Jamestown was no longer fragile. It was becoming permanent. But Jamestown was only the beginning. A century later, 13 colonies would stretch along the Atlantic coast. Farmers, merchants, enslaved laborers, indigenous nations, soldiers,